Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, I told you earlier in the week why I thought it made sense for the Suns to stand pat, to run it back, to bring the same group together again and try to win a championship in year 2 as a core. Today, why it might not make so much sense for the Suns, and some Olympic observations. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host, credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show. Welcome to Locked On Suns. Thank you for making us your first listen to kick off your Thursday. One day closer to Summer League. I'll be going to Vegas Friday morning. Hopefully you're excited for that, but we got some time before then, so thank you for spending it with us. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Hit that button, get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all off-season long. News, games, the Olympics, Summer League, all of it right here. Become an everydayer with me every day. Today's episode brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off when you do make your first purchase. $20 off your first purchase, code LOCKEDONNBA. More from Game Time later in the show. Terms apply. All right. Let's start here. Part 2 of a show I did earlier in the week where I made the case, a whole bunch of different angles of the case of why it in fact did make sense for the Suns to stand pat. To quickly recap that line of thinking, which is right now where the Suns are sitting, with very much the same roster and some marginal improvements to improve the depth and the athleticism and everything else. The types of trades they might have wanted to do with Nurkic weren't there. They were able to maximize everything else. The big three worked decently well. They added optionality around that big three that should be able to make it better. The deadline in February might have some different and more intriguing, enticing trade options than what the Suns are looking at right now. And the player development situation top to bottom is just a little more coherent. So that's the case for, but let's make the case against it. All right, and it's there's not as many reasons against it, if I'm being honest, which maybe tells you something right there. But I see 2 main things that make standing pat and running it back with this group a risk. Now, the obvious one is they got swept in the first round, but the difference between getting swept in the first round and being competitive in the postseason, that wasn't going to get flipped over in one move anyway. Health has to go your way, matchups have to go your way, and a lot of other things have to look a lot better. They just played like crap. They fired their coach, and they made some changes. So let's not hold them to the sweep, but let's also be realistic about where they are. And so again, 2 main things. Let's start with the first one, which is more on the court. The problem with this team, in large part, over the course of the whole season, was their defense. That was obvious as a weak point when they assembled the roster, even before DeAndre Ayton got traded, frankly, but especially after he left. It was part of why they hired Frank Vogel. It was a focus all season long. In the regular season, the Suns finished the year as the 12th best defense in the NBA in terms of points allowed per 100 possessions when you exclude garbage time. 12th is not bad. 12th on defense can win you a championship as long as the offense is elite. Now, the offense wasn't elite, but you would hope that just gets closer to the top of the NBA versus 9th, sort of by itself, and the moves they've made will help them get there. But the defense was the bigger issue. Not only were they 12th in the regular season, which is good but not great, 114.3 points allowed per 100 possessions, they plummeted down to in the playoffs, they allowed 125.8 points per 100 possessions to the Minnesota Timberwolves in that 4-game sweep. Very small sample because they did get swept, so, a lot of the other teams, they're the worst defensive team that actually made the playoffs in the league. So Indiana, New York, some of these other teams that we think of as being pretty porous on the defensive end were better than the Suns. Only Golden State and Atlanta were worse, and those were just one play-in game apiece. And so, good but not great in the regular season and atrocious in the playoffs. On a weakness we already knew existed based on how the roster was assembled before they even played out the year, that's a worry. That's a concern. So, they've addressed some aspects of their defense. I think with Royce O'Neal for a full season, their overall team defense and size should be a little bit better. If Monte Morris can get back to normal, he is another point of attack option at the very least. Somebody that you can put on small guards and have a chance. Remember Terry Rozier went off against the Suns in that game against Charlotte, in a loss, and maybe even a body to throw at, let's say, Jalen Brunson, for instance, or whatever guy you kind of want to point to there. Dunn, Iguodaro, those are athletic upside picks that could potentially contribute. We'll see what happens. But in an ideal world, you would have been able to get a defensive wing stopper, maybe a more athletic center option besides Mason Plumlee to be your backup, or even potentially swap in Nurkic's place as the starter. None of that has happened, so you're rolling into another season where defense is going to be a big question mark and your personnel is going to be at a disadvantage on a night-to-night basis. The other case for not standing pat, for trying to shake it up, make a big move, make a big improvement is not only did the rest of the Western Conference continue to get better or solidify itself, but it doubled down on the aspects of the best teams doubled down on the aspects of their identity and their style that were already most difficult for the Suns to match up with, right? They've matched up decently with the Nuggets for years, and that's one of the funny, weird things about the Suns and why it's a little bit hard to predict where they'll end up, right? But set that aside, the teams they struggled with the most, Dallas for multiple years running now, Oklahoma City, of course, Minnesota, who just beat them, and a lot of these teams went all in on that identity, that athletic, physical, swarming identity that the Suns really struggled with. Minnesota kept all their guys. They didn't blow it up. They didn't trade Towns. They're going to be the same team, but a year better with all their youth. Oklahoma City went and got Alex Caruso, drafted more wing players and more perimeter guys. Kassan Wallace, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, those guys will all be a year better, and now they have another big man to throw in there in Isaiah Hartenstein. Dallas, with the Najee Marshall addition, the Quentin Grimes flyer, obviously Lively getting a year better. Klay Thompson maybe a little bit of a change up as far as the identity goes, but of course keeping PJ Washington and whatnot. They're going to be that type of team as well. And in the East, I know, the Suns are a long way from thinking about that, but Orlando adds KCP. They're another wing, heavy, small ball, versatile type of team. The Knicks get Mikal Bridges. They're trending in that direction. The Sixers get Paul George. The Boston Celtics title win has prompted teams to go in that direction. The Suns struggle with teams like that, and there's more of them than ever before, and the best teams are all built that way. So they might match up great with the Nuggets, who now will be 2 years old and a weakened version of what their championship group even was. They might match up with some other teams well, but by standing pat, they run the risk of kind of falling behind where the league is going. And that's a concern. So, in terms of the assets they had at their disposal, maintaining those assets, maintaining that flexibility, betting on your big three to have a better season and a more cohesive chemistry together in the second go-round, that all makes tons of sense. But there's big picture reasons why the Suns still are kind of facing an uphill battle to be in the mix for a championship based on how this offseason has gone. One thing that could swing in their favor to make that big three look even better is Devin Booker's performance with Team USA. He got the start in exhibition game number 1 on Wednesday night. I'll give you my observations on what that could mean for him going forward coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier for America's pastime. Prices on the Game Time app even go down the closer it gets to first pitch. What I love about Game Time, though, in addition to loving baseball, in addition to price, value, up and down all the time, constantly finding ways to save money for you, is the seat views right from the app. Panoramic photos of what it will look like from the spot that you are thinking about sitting when you're looking at a ticket. Am I going to be behind a bar? Am I going to be behind glass? Am I going to be way really steep up to where I'm squinting and it's a little scary to walk up to my seats? All that stuff you know before you buy. So you're getting a good price, of course. You have access to all the types of tickets you could possibly want, from sports to comedy to concerts and theater and whatever. But of course, you know what you're getting with those seat views. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's keep it rolling. So, look, the exhibition game against Canada, it was both teams' first matchups in the kind of training camp leading up to the Paris Olympics. It was, Team Canada is almost entirely made up of NBA guys. Teams are, holding players out for rest, with Kevin Durant, of course, who I talked about yesterday, and I'll close out the show with a little bit more on KD sitting with the calf injury. Kawhi Leonard already got sent home. It's game number 1 of a long play here. So I'm not going to go overboard with the analysis of the intricacies of the game. It felt like an all-star game at points. It felt like an experiment, throwing darts at the board and seeing what sticks at other points. But Devin Booker got the start. So KD out, and the 5th starter spot that we kind of always knew was up for grabs, that leaves 2. So the 3 locks, of course, did end up starting as expected, which is Curry, LeBron, and Embiid. But the 2 other starters were Booker and Drew Holiday. So there's still a question as to when Durant comes back. One of those guys will have to go to the bench. The other one might keep that 5th starter spot. But frankly, I'm not even that worried if Booker starts or not. I don't really care about the starting and everything else. 1, because it's still early and that could change by the final game. 2, because we've seen Team USA start and close with very different players each way. So whatever. I do want, of course, I'm not, a robot. I want to see Book play. I want to see him get meaningful opportunities. I want to see him contribute. I just want to see him out there. I've watched almost every game this dude has played. Of course, I want to see that. But I don't care if it's starting, because the point is what him even starting in this game proves, considering a lot of people had him on the could he even play, might he be getting DNPs type of conversation as everything started up this month. Him even starting at all shows his value, his adaptability, his malleability, his versatility. Olympic Book is back. He didn't take a shot until, I believe, close to the end of the half, if I have that right. That sounds crazy. I don't think there was a box score for this thing outside of the ones that, like, the media who's there can take a quick picture of when they print out the physical copies. But this was like, an exhibition that Fox Sports 1 just decided to throw on TV. So it was pretty informal. I don't have every stat that Book accumulated, but he affected the game without looking to score. And that's just so crazy. I mean, it really is, right? I know it's the Olympics, I understand, but I mean, there's countless players you wouldn't say that about, right? I mean, last World Cup, it was a big talking point that Brandon Ingram was incapable of adjusting in that way. He wasn't giving effort on defense. He was refusing to kind of play off the ball and shoot threes and just sort of be a role player. And he started to fade. He wasn't getting minutes. His regular season this past year was a little bit of a step back, I think you would have to say, from where his best years were. And now he's staring down a situation in New Orleans where you can draw a straight line from that World Cup experience to them not wanting to extend him and him being on the trade market. Just as one example of what it can look like when players get to this stage and get to this environment, and they might know mentally they're going to have to adjust and adapt and change, but they just can't actually bring themselves to do it. Book, it has never been a problem, and that speaks volumes for a dude who in the NBA, I mean, his main responsibility for most of the time he's been in the league is get buckets. On awful teams, on great teams, on mediocre teams, and everything in between, Book has been a scorer. 3-level, ISO, off-ball, spot-up, transition, whatever. Booker puts the ball in the basket. We get to the Team USA environment, he's defending on the ball, he's getting rebounds and hit-ahead passes, he's making the, one skip pass more to swing it around the arc and go from good to great from a shot selection standpoint. It's really cool to behold. And that is a great thing to see for him earning more opportunities this summer as we watch him with Team USA. But it is also a good sign of, I think, just getting reps doing some of the dirty work that he's going to have to do with the Suns this season. That brings me to something I guess I just am going to be wondering about, keeping an eye out for, trying to maybe measure a little bit here as all this rolls along, which is that it's counter to, I guess, all of our assumptions. It's counter to expectation that Book's best stretch ever happened where they get back from the bubble. He has 2 months off then, goes right into a very condensed regular season, into a finals run, into the Olympics, which creates another condensed off season and another condensed season after that. And he's an MVP candidate the following year after the finals and the Olympics. Plays a bunch, healthy, gets hurt in the beginning of the playoffs, but comes back, looks good still, and obviously gets eliminated in the second round that year. But from, training camp in November of 2020 through, the elimination by the Mavs in May of 2022, he did not get much of a break, and that contributed to one of his more healthy stretches and one of his the most impactful stretch of his entire NBA career. So all of this stuff is impossible. I mean, we are not at the point where we can accurately measure and predict what players' bodies are going to do in any sport. I do think we are pushing the boundaries of it in terms of the style of plays, the evolution of how basketball is played, and the fact that we're still playing so much of it in the NBA and international schedules. I mean, soccer is very similar. These guys are being pushed to the brink. So I'm not here to say play as much basketball as possible and that's some sort of secret sauce to avoiding injuries. But with Book, we have evidence that happened. And especially considering that the Suns got eliminated a lot earlier than they wanted to, and earlier than they were expecting to this year, I'm just going to be kind of on the lookout for how it affects him physically. Maybe he's just the type of player that, of course, needs some time off, but that these summer experiences where he's able to train and really be competitive, maybe that helps him. We'll see. Last but not least, it's the Kevin Durant Media Tour this month, and we have another set of interviews with Kellen Olson of Arizona Sports and Tim Bontemps of ESPN. Let's talk through the offensive end and why Durant is optimistic that the big three can find their groove in year two together based on some comments this week. We'll get to that after a break. All right, let's close it out. So, couple quotes to read to you from Durant this week. Shout out to Kellen Olson covering things locally. Gerald Bourguet appears to be out there now as well, starting on Wednesday. So the Suns side of Team USA is in good hands. Of course, national coverage as well. We talked about the Vince Goodwill interview on Monday. Now we have this ESPN interview from Tim Bontemps as well. But let's start with what Kellen asked KD about, which is related to the offense, right? If you remember, in the aftermath of the season when Vogel got fired, there was a lot of finger pointing about the offense, and Durant's frustration with it was referenced specifically in the Athletic article that kind of aired the dirty laundry of the team. So Durant responded to those reports today, or on Tuesday, to Kellen. He said, quote, "If we're struggling on offense and the ball's not moving and your best players aren't being put in a position or in space to showcase their skill, that's with anybody. I ain't like when Book was in the corner a lot, or if Brad was sitting around a lot, we just stood around. I think you could make more options, or we could have had more movement in our offense. To say I was frustrated about that, that's just a basketball thing that we always feel. We're trying to figure it out. Style of play is not something that I'm pissed off at the team about. It's like, yo, we need to figure it out to get better." He said he thinks Bud has been watching film of last year to get some ideas of how to improve, keep things that worked, throw things away that didn't work, and KD said he's excited to get on the court with Book, or with the big three again under Bud is what I should say. The other aspect of this, to go to the Bontemps interview, was that KD pointed out that they won 49 games, which is important to remember in all of this. And the record, of course, with the big three all healthy was even better than that. The record after Beal got back in late December was 50-plus win pace. On and on and on. The metrics tell you this team was better than it actually performed, and KD sort of reminded us of that in this interview. What he also said is how many the other reminder he gave, I should say, is that they threw a lot of games away. They were so bad in clutch situations, so bad in fourth quarters that, it was maybe even another level worse than it should have been last season. Right? So he said to Kellen, he'll know more once they all get out on the floor. It was a discombobulated season. They didn't have a rhythm on the offensive end. Defensively, they were still trying to figure things out, and they just want to build off of that. He said, I love what we have. I feel confident in our group, and I feel like a lot of people are underestimating us. He said it's not the first time that he's been in a situation where a team underperformed one playoffs and then had to come into the next regular season with doubt and a chip on their shoulder and some being underestimated. He said a similar thing to Bontemps where, he basically said they have the big three. They have the three players that they like, and nothing's changed there. He still believes in it. He felt like, despite some of the discombobulation that he's talking about, that they were able to show what it can look like when all three of them are operating at full force together. Personally, I think about the Cavs game in early April, I thought was an amazing display of what they can look like. I thought the Lakers game coming off the All-Star break was pretty good in terms of just kind of getting up and down, sharing the ball, everybody getting in on the action. I'm sure there's plenty of other games I'm forgetting. So that's the case, right? It's funny. You look at the NBA. And I mentioned in that first segment when I was talking about the case against, standing pat and running it back, that a lot of the league has gotten better, has amped up, the perimeter wing focus kind of what's winning in the NBA right now. The best duo in the NBA, right? You're probably still going to say Denver. Maybe you say Dallas, just based on their recent track record. Of course, the Lakers have a claim at that, even if the rest of their roster is not where you'd like it to be. The Jays in Boston. Milwaukee has a claim, of course. Philly now. Heck, even Indiana, Miami. Booker and KD alone would be in contention for that. Maybe you'd put them near the top. But trio-wise, top three players, of course, everybody can take issue with whether that can win in the modern NBA in depth and all those things. And of course, those are major question marks for the Suns. I'm not denying that. But if you're just going to go who has the best top three in the league, who has the best third best player in the league, and you hold up Bradley Beal versus, the Celtics probably have him beat, whether you like White or Holiday, two-way ability-wise, reliability-wise, maybe those guys. But the Knicks, third best player, Anunoby, Randall, well, Bucks, come on, Chris Middleton, we don't know what he is anymore. Cleveland, I don't even know who their second best player is some nights. The Sixers probably can compete. Oklahoma City, no. Denver, Aaron Gordon, probably not. Minnesota, they're a unique team. It's probably Gobert. Maybe he's even their second best player, so that's interesting. Dallas, no. Lakers, no. Pelicans, we'll see with Ingram, but I don't really love Ingram. DeMar DeRozan, it's interesting. The Suns still have that advantage. The idea of why they built the roster the way they built it still stands. The big three played well together. The offense was pretty damn good when all three were out there, and especially when they were able to put playmaking and shooting around it, whether that was Allen or Nurkic, or Gordon, frankly, at times. And so I kind of think KD's right to be optimistic. I think it's reasonable to try and at least roll into October and the beginning of the season and take advantage of training camp and everything else and say, let's be a real team for a little while. Let's make this trio even better. Let's have a higher floor. And let's at least see what that looks like. Because once we did see what it looked like at the end of last season, the results were pretty decent. Now, the beginning of the season, not so much, when injuries did hit and the depth was not good enough. And of course, by the end of the season, whether you're talking about the final stretch of the regular season, which got ugly, or of course, the playoff sweep, not so much. So you can't get content. You just got swept. But I think the case of seeing how this can look and unleashing an offense that you believe can be even better than it was because of the advantages you're going to have every night when teams are just trying to match up with you and contain you is reasonable. KD seems to think it. They have a new coach whose job it is to make it true, and they have better role players to help it become true. Now they just got to make it happen. That'll wrap us up. One more episode to close out the week with Stephen Perjone Garner, looking ahead to Summer League tomorrow. So hit follow or subscribe. Get that episode in your feed and more, including a recap of the first Summer League game from Vegas, featuring yours truly, and more, right here. All summer, become an everydayer. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.